Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room where I sat, idly flipping through the mail. Bills, a promotional flyer, and then something unexpected, an envelope from a local event organizer known for its high-profile concerts. Curious, I tore it open and two gleaming tickets fell into my lap. The glossy tickets bore the name of our favorite band, one that Emma and I had followed since our college days. A grin spread across my face as I imagined the surprise Emma had planned. The concert was set for next Saturday. She hadn't breathed a word about it. I pictured us there, among the cheering crowd, the music enveloping us in a world where it was just the two of us again, reconnecting. The thought warmed me on the inside, pushing away the lingering doubts that had crept into our marriage lately. As the week progressed, Emma said nothing about the tickets. Each day, I expected her to reveal her plan, perhaps over dinner or while we lounged in bed, but she remained oddly silent about any such plans. The silence gnawed at me, an unspoken tension building with each passing day. On the day of the concert, I found myself alone at home. Emma had mentioned a last-minute work emergency, her words rushed, her eyes avoiding mine. Something in her demeanor had shifted, a restlessness that I couldn't quite place. The secrecy around the concert gnawed at me. With a growing suspicion, I decided to follow her. I trailed her discreetly to a small, intimate venue, the very place where the concert was being held. Heart pounding, I watched from a distance as she met someone at the entrance. A man, roughly my height, but with a confident, charismatic air that made him stand out immediately. They laughed, his arm brushing hers in a way that was too familiar, too intimate. The betrayal sliced through me. My initial shock gave way to a cold, seething anger as I watched them disappear into the crowd, her laughter echoing in my ears. I had been replaced, so easily, so thoughtfully, with concert tickets I was never meant to find. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of them together haunted me, an endless loop of betrayal that fueled a growing desire for revenge. I would not let this deceit go unpunished. I began to plan, each step calculated with a cold precision. Emma's life as she knew it was about to crumble. I would ensure she lost everything she held dear, just as I had. The concert tickets, once a symbol of our shared love, now marked the beginning of her downfall. I would start there, unraveling her life thread by thread. It would be meticulous, thorough, and she would never see me coming. In the wake of the concert, my days blurred into a series of calculated moves and sleepless nights. I began by diving into Emma's digital life, an area she had always guarded closely. Her laptop, always open and inviting in the past, had become her constant companion, shut away whenever I came near. One evening, as she showered, I seized the opportunity. Her laptop hummed to life at my touch, her password unchanged, a small oversight in her newly secretive world. Emails, messages, social media, I sifted through them with a rising tide of cold fury. It didn't take long to uncover the depth of her deception, dates, intimate conversations, plans made in the shadow of our crumbling marriage. Her lover, Tom, was woven through her digital tapestry, a stark contrast to the life we had shared. Armed with this knowledge, I crafted my first move. I knew Tom owned a small, successful gallery downtown, a place that prided itself on exclusivity and privacy. A perfect target. Going out, I called to Emma, my voice hollow, as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. To where? Her voice followed me, tinged with a curiosity that had been absent for weeks. Just out, I replied, the vagueness intentional, a small jab at her own elusive answers. The gallery was quiet when I arrived, the soft lighting casting long shadows across the polished floors. Tom was there, overseeing the setup of a new exhibit, his back to me as I approached. "Tom," I said, my voice calm, controlled. He turned, a polite smile freezing into a wary frown as he recognized me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice guarded. "You can stop seeing my wife," I replied, stepping closer, my words deliberate and sharp. His expression flickered, guilt passing momentarily before he masked it with indifference. "I think you're mistaken," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm not here to make a scene. But I know everything, Tom. And if you think this ends with you walking away unscathed, you're wrong." He stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you," I said quietly. "Just know that I'm aware. And actions have consequences." I left him standing there, the threat hanging between us like the art on his walls, open for interpretation but unmistakable in its intent. Back at home, I watched Emma, reading the strain in her actions, the way she glanced at her phone, then at me. The seed of doubt was planted. As I lay next to her that night, pretending to sleep, I planned my next move. The destruction of her world would be slow, a series of whispers and shadows, and it would begin with Tom. The following morning, I awoke with a resolute clarity. While Emma busied herself in the kitchen, her phone lay abandoned on the dining table, buzzing intermittently. My gaze fixed on it, knowing each vibration was a thread unraveling in the fabric of her secret life. I walked over and picked up the phone just as another message flashed across the screen. It was from Tom. "We need to talk. It's urgent." "Who's Tom?" I asked aloud, feigning ignorance as Emma turned, her face draining of color. "He's just a friend from work," she stuttered, her eyes darting to the phone in my hand. "A friend who sends urgent messages early in the morning?" I prodded further, watching her facade crack. "It's nothing. Please, give me my phone," she reached out, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. Instead of handing it back, I opened the message thread, scrolling through their recent history. Her eyes widened with fear. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, a tremble in her voice. "I think you know why," I replied coldly, locking the phone and setting it down. "We're far beyond the point of pretending, Emma." The confrontation escalated quickly. Accusations flew, her denials faltering as I laid out the evidence of her affair. I could see the panic set in as her world started to tilt on its axis. "I need some air," she murmured, escaping the kitchen. I watched her go, knowing that each step she took away from me further solidified my resolve. As she left, I picked up the phone again and dialed a number I had written down the night before, the number of a well-known private investigator in the city. It was time to gather undeniable proof of her betrayal that would stand up in any legal proceedings. Divorce was now inevitable, and I was going to ensure I came out of it unscathed. "Hello, I need your services to follow someone," I spoke into the phone, my voice steady, detached from the turmoil that had engulfed my life. Within hours, the investigator was on board, promising discreet surveillance of both Emma and Tom. The web of their deceit would be documented meticulously, every secret meeting, every lie captured in stark reality. This evidence would be the linchpin in ensuring the divorce swung heavily in my favor. That evening, Emma returned, her eyes wary, her demeanor subdued. "We need to talk," she began, her voice a mix of resignation and defiance. "Yes, we do," I agreed, sitting down across from her. "But not about us. There's nothing left to discuss on that front. I want to talk about how we handle the fallout." The conversation was long and fraught with tension. Terms of separation, living arrangements, the inevitable legal proceedings, each topic a minefield. But through it all, I remained detached, my actions calculated and precise. Emma was no longer the woman I had loved, she was now just someone to strategize around, a factor in my plan for retribution. As she spoke, I could see the toll the day had taken on her. Her voice wavered, her arguments faded, and I knew the real battle was just beginning. But I was ready, for every move, every countermove. Emma's betrayal had set this path in motion, and I was committed to seeing it through to its bitter end. The days that followed were a chess game of strategic moves and countermeasures. The private investigator had been thorough, providing me with timestamps, photographs, and videos, each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of Emma's duplicity. I held the dossier tightly under my arm as I prepared for the final confrontation, knowing this was the culmination of all my meticulous planning. Emma sat in the living room, her posture rigid, her eyes wary as I entered. The room was thick with tension, an unspoken understanding that this meeting would seal our fates. "I have something you need to see," I said, my voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of finality. I tossed the dossier onto the coffee table in front of her. The sound of it hitting the wood felt like a gavel coming down in judgment. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and defiance as she reached for the folder. "Proof," I replied simply. "Of every lie, every betrayal. It's over, Emma." As she flipped through the pages, her face paled, her hands trembling slightly. Photographs of her and Tom, intimate messages, times and places, irrefutable evidence of her affair. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking, not in sorrow, but in anger. "How could you invade my privacy like this? How could I?" I echoed, incredulous. "How could you betray everything we had? This isn't just about what you did. It's about what I'm about to do." I watched her closely, gauging her reaction. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of fear passing through them. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm taking everything," I stated, my tone cold and detached. "The house, the savings. And your precious reputation. I've sent copies of that dossier to your parents, your friends, and your employer. Everyone will know who you really are, Emma." Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock. "You wouldn't." "I already have," I cut her off. "And as for Tom, he'll find his gallery's reputation a bit tarnished once I'm done." The mention of Tom sparked a new level of fear in her eyes. "You're cruel," she spat out, her voice shaky. "You think this will make you feel better? Ruining me?" "It's not about feeling better. It's about justice. It's about ensuring you never forget the consequences of your actions." Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping back violently. "I hate you," she hissed, her eyes seething with hatred. "I expected nothing less," I replied evenly. She made no move to touch the dossier again, instead turning towards the door. With each step, the finality of our parting grew heavier in the air. At the threshold, she paused, looking back at me. Her expression was one of loss and resignation, a stark contrast to the defiant woman I had once loved. "You'll regret this," she said, a warning or perhaps a curse. "Maybe," I conceded. "But I'll live with my decisions, just as you'll live with yours." With that, she left, the door closing with a definitive thud behind her. I remained in the silence of the room, the weight of my actions settling around me. Justice, or revenge, whatever I had sought, it was done now. Emma was out of my life, her betrayal repaid in kind, and the future lay open, a blank canvas marked by the scars of the past. As the echo of the door closing faded, I realized the solitude I had fought so hard to achieve was colder and more bitter than I had anticipated. But it was mine, and it was what I had chosen in the face of betrayal.